Welcome to episode 2 of Insights as a Service. First up, just want to say thank you to everyone who listened to episode 1. The feedback has been awesome. Lots of really helpful stuff coming in and just really nice, reinforcement of what we're trying to do. So thanks again. Today, we are going to kick off with news. As always, lots of M&A activity to go over in both Australia and New Zealand. We're going to have a piece on pricing, something that is important to all of us in the MSP and Telco world as inflation starts to bite a little. And we're going to wrap up with our second part of the conversation I had with Mike Jenkins, the CEO and co-founder of the Instillery.
We live or die by two metrics. It's ENPS, which is our employment satisfaction, and customer NPS.
Okay, as I said in the intro, there's a fair amount of merger and acquisition activity across New Zealand and Australia at the moment. And today we're going to kick off with the talk around the Aussie Broadband acquisition of Over the Wire, which is an ASX listed company. It's a business-focused telco with about 100 million in revenue, and it's headquartered in Brisbane. It's important to note that this approach by Aussie, which just in way of comparison, has revenue of 350 million. It's taken the form of an unsolicited, non-binding indicative offer, which happens all the time across the ASX on a daily basis and often leads absolutely nowhere once the books have been reviewed. So at $5.75 a share, this could work out well for Over the Wire, who themselves actually listed in 2016 at $1 per share. So it would certainly represent a good result for co-founders Michael Amiros and Brent Padden, a couple of guys who have done really well to grow their business through well-targeted acquisitions in the 6 years since listing. For Aussie Broadband, this represents a quick way to scale in the more profitable enterprise space. My only question really is, in terms of value, would the overhead represented by integration that is yet to be realized between the various Over the Wire business units, would that present a higher cost than perhaps the initial offer of $5.75 per share represents? Moving across the ditch to NZ, 2 Degrees and Orcon NZ, which is basically Focus NZ, are in talks to merge. Both had IPOs planned, which I think a lot of people will know about. They've been pretty highly publicized, but these mergers are serious enough that those plans have been paused. The thinking is that they could unite to form a single entity with a market cap around 2.5 billion and EBITDA of 200 million. And that's before synergies are gained post-merger, which I think, given the network overlap, would be quite significant. So if all that plays out as expected, the new entity could list on the NZX and or ASX at an even higher valuation. 2 Degrees faces a future of 5G and 6G, which is something Telstra is already talking about, which is kind of crazy. Which will require a huge amount of capital expenditure. So the access to funding that comes through a combined listing would be a huge help. For Orcon NZ, being able to compete with Spark and Vodafone in the mobile space rather than having to put up with a rubbish MVNO, which is a mobile, sound very American there, virtual network operator agreement, basically a tier 2 wholesale mobile agreement, could see sales surge. That's something that Vocus, now Orcon NZ, has been relatively vocal about for quite some time. Just the lack of access to quality mobile data, mobile voice agreements for those that don't have their own networks. In undersea cable news, New Zealand and Australia have another undersea cable coming. And this one is a bit different, as it's going to be the first to land on the South Island of New Zealand. It's going to be called Hawaiki Nui, and it's the second one for the Hawaiki team. It'll connect Singapore, Indonesia, Australia, New Zealand, and the United States. It's due to come online by 2025, and it's going to offer 240 terabits per second in capacity, which is a massive jump from the 30 offered by Hawaii's existing cable. This cable offers a nice level of protection for Hawaii because it offers diverse international paths. It moves us away from the only scenario we have known ever in NZ Telco, which is that of all international traffic leaving from the top half of the North Island. And who doesn't like more diverse paths, and who doesn't like more competition? It can only be good for the industry. Something that I was pretty happy to see come out in the last week was the New Zealand Telco levy ruling for 2021. This is always interesting to me because it gives great insight as to how each NZ telco is faring. If an entity learns less than 10 million, they won't be in the list. And if they are in the list, we can see how they fared against previous year's results. I'm happy to say that Lightwire, which I am the Chief Revenue Officer for, grew by 22.2% over the last 12 months. And that's against an industry average across the list of 3.5% growth. Excluding the fiber carriers and just looking at the ISPs in the list, the other telcos that did really well were Now with 24.5% growth, My Republic with 45% growth, and 2 Degrees with 12.5%. The ISPs that struggled were Vital, which used to be collectively known through the brands CityLink, Araneo, and TeamTalk, which went backwards by 18%, and Vector dropped 4% as well. Tivoli and Inspire were two ISPs, two internet service providers that cracked into the list for the first time this year through continued organic growth. So well done to those people. Sky and Todd have also been added to the list. Sky due to the same ruling that saw Cordia's obligations increase, and Todd through its interests in Nova Energy, Total Consumer Services, and Todd Digital. So there is the lay of the land for the NZ telco scene. I thought it was interesting as well after the piece we did last week around Huawei to see that Joe Biden has signed a new law, the Secure Equipment Act, which limits the Federal Communication Commission, which they call the FCC over there in the States, from reviewing or approving any authorization application for equipment that poses an unacceptable risk to national security. And I think it's probably safe to assume that all Huawei applications will be seen in that light. The new law also enables the FCC to revoke previous approvals, which is pretty brutal. It only sneaked past the Senate, though. The vote was passed with 420 votes for and 4 against. And lastly, something a bit different this week, just a reminder to be careful on the crypto front. A couple of weeks ago, when the Squid cryptocurrency creators, who of course are anonymous in this unregulated environment, they pulled the rug by cashing out their coins for real money, draining the liquidity pool and crashing the price all the way to zero. Those scammers, they've made around 3.3 million because the price peaked at about $2.86. And even though some publications, Gizmodo is one that I know of, were reporting that it was obviously a scam before the crash, as they pointed out, the coins couldn't be sold, only bought. So many people jumped in. So with so many stories relating to people making huge sums of crypto, I can understand why people get excited. I personally know a few that have made extremely good gains. It can be hard to avoid irrational behavior driven by FOMO, but this is just a good reminder that we're still very much in the Wild West when it comes to crypto, and we all need to apply critical thinking to our purchasing decisions. Let's talk about pricing, specifically how to determine the ideal price for your products or services through a structured approach. I'm sure we are all in the know at this point that inflation is definitely a looming issue, actually make that a current issue. We've all seen it. There's a shortage of goods, prices are rising, and yet new money continues to flood into the economy through quantitative easing programs by governments across the world, really, which is driving demand. So there'll be more pressure than ever on our margins. And if you're looking to increase your prices in a crowded MSP or telco market, it will need to be based off a well-researched approach and paired with some smart positioning. In the last 12 months, I've completed 2 price and positioning reviews, one for Lightwire's rural residential services and another for our business services across NZ and Australia. And at the outset, I had very little idea as to how I should structure those projects. But thankfully, we engaged a guy called Ron Wood, who runs a consultancy firm called Pricing Insight. He guided me really through the whole process, and that has paid massive dividends for us. And while we really don't have time today to allow me to get into all the detail, I wanted to give you the key points that I've learned. Quick plug here. We made this podcast to really drive home the point that Lightwire is here to promote MSP growth and support our partners in unique and meaningful ways. If you're a new listener and don't know much about Lightwire, check out lightwirebusiness.com and get in touch if you think we may be able to help your business drive forward. When looking at pricing, it's a good idea to start by understanding the risks you face. A few of the key questions to consider are, do you have undefined value drivers? Meaning, do you understand what it is that gives you a value premium over the competition? Have you got alignment at the management level? Does everyone agree on what it is you're doing to drive value? Have you got a reliance on discounting to win or retain business? Are you dealing with procurement as effectively as possible? In other words, is vendor management in hand? Do you have pricing inconsistency across services or products? meaning is the same methodology used, or has it got out of hand as time has gone by and different people have played around with the pricing? Are you able to manage price increases if required? That's obviously a big one. Do you have a cost plus pricing structure where you simply take whatever the inputs are and add a percentage? One of the biggest takeaways for me in my pricing education was that your price should reflect your value positioning, your value premium. That means you need to dig deep and understand how you compare to the market, by segment, and you need to do that a number of ways. Through talking to your team, through talking to current customers, talking to past customers, and talking to people that have not dealt with you at all, you will gain a real understanding of your brand, how it's perceived, and its position within the market. The next step is using all that detail, everything you've learned, to develop real-world composite personas and using them as the basis for what's called a customer value discovery scorecard. This is probably the single most important process when looking to understand how you should price your services. The scorecard divides customers by type. So, for example, you may have 3 business sizes, one with 51 to 200 seats, another with 201 to 500, and a third with 500 or more seats. Within each of those, you're going to want to create personas. So you may have a CFO, a business owner or CEO, a salesperson, or a finance contact. All of these people will have different drivers through which they perceive value to be created. So for your finance contacts, you may find they derive value from clarity around billing or a lack of variability in monthly charges, whereas your customer's sales team may be much more focused on the feature sets within the service you offer. To create the customer value discovery scorecard, you need to speak with these types of people to really get to understand them. And this can be done a number of ways, but ultimately you'll come up with a list of service attributes that define value in use and value at risk. Value in use relates to the tangible things that the service provides. So in the telco world, that would be things like speed, latency, uptime, data allowances, those sorts of things. Value at risk may be related to things such as lost productivity from downtime or the risk of not being able to work from home if, say, service latency was too high. If you then associate a number between 1 to 10 with each of those values to indicate the importance those customers associate with each value driver, and then compare yourself to various competitors, giving yourself and them a ranking between 1 and 10 against each of those value drivers to indicate your capability to meet those customer expectations, you're going to start to get a really clear picture as to how you compare with the competition across various segments and across the various people that purchase your services within each of those segments. So look, this can of course be a bit subjective, but if done properly, it can provide really valuable insights. The outcome will be that you end up with a positive or negative value premium against the competition for each segment, and your pricing premium should match your value premium. So if you in theory hold a 10% value premium against competitor A, but you don't think you could provide the same service at a 10% higher price point than them, then you need to go back and check your assumptions. The next key point is that your positioning needs to reflect your value drivers. At this point, you will know which clients value your specific offering and why. Your next step is to ensure your public-facing persona, your website, marketing material, and the actions of your team, of course, reflect those, as they're going to form the basis of the price you expect your customers to be happy to pay. Having clarity around what drives your value is really, it's genuinely liberating. It brings your required messaging into sharp focus and makes the job of marketing just so much easier. You'll know who you're focusing on because they're the ones who see the most value in what you do differently, what they specifically see value in, and what price that means they are prepared to pay. As with anything, you want to lead with bullets, then move to cannonballs. Test with limited release if possible, and carefully measure conversion and churn rates while you do it. That may mean initially introducing rates to a subset of new customers only, or moving rates on selected services while leaving others as they are. I suggest doing this for 3 months to gauge the impact. One key point that I can't forget to mention is that if you don't understand your competitors' offerings, you'll have no basis on which to set your own rates. You'll have to task somebody in your business with trawling through competitor sites, talking to friendly customers who have been approached in the past and maybe have some of those competitors' quotes. Whatever you can really do to come up with a comprehensive list of market rates. At this point, you will understand if your price over or underestimates your value premium. Lastly, if you can back the claims you make around value on offer with guarantees, you should. They will be far more compelling if backed up. We are definitely in a period of perhaps not high inflation yet, but certainly increasing inflation. So The ability to justify a price increase based on a well-understood and well-positioned value premium may be key to your business succeeding or thriving in the coming 12 to 24 months. And I know I've only scratched the surface here, but if anyone wants more detail on the process we followed at Lightwire, because I know this has been very wordy, please just get in touch. I'll drop my contact details at the end of the show, and I'm always happy to talk. Now we're going to finish off our conversation with Mike Jenkins, CEO and co-founder of the Instillery. We had part one last week. Today we're going to wrap it all up. It was a really good and I'd say strong finish to the conversation where we covered off on things such as keeping a focus on key competencies as a startup, how to scale cost effectively, focusing on the metrics that matter, and when to back your gut versus the data. So let's get back to Mike. And so you've got this one customer, you're probably on the back of that making some hires, I assume.
Yeah.
Going, right, let's beef up the skills. At what, like how hard was it during those early days when someone would say, hey, do you want to take on, I don't know, support desk, or hey, do you guys have Wi-Fi? Like, I don't know, but other things that came up. How hard was it to go, not our focus, not our core business, let's stay on the mission?
So important. We really wanted to make sure we were laser focused on our core business. And for us, that meant a lot of things. It was, we wanted to lead in cloud, first and foremost. Pretty generalist terms, but again, these were pretty early and brave new times for us to be going out and saying that hyperscale cloud was the new data center as a core concept. Quite challenging for a number of people, right? And so for us,
I still don't understand it. So
yeah, well, I mean, you're one of many. You know, it's not for everybody. But you know, I think probably more than anything, that focus was really tied to our purpose. It's like we felt duty bound, like genuinely duty bound, to help unlock Kiwi businesses and government agencies from these legacy, expensive, and super inflexible IT constructs and contracts. And we felt that because we were so small, you know, as an organization, if we were to dilute or go out for the shiny thing over there, whatever it might be, in such a short time frame, because we had customers asking us to do that, right? They wanted the same experience they were getting from data center evacuations and DevOps deployments into wider parts of the business. We just felt that would probably break us, you know. And to be honest, we had a few attempts of that, you know, peeking out into things like cloud connectivity and cloud security, and then quickly coming back, you know, because you're not building out teams of 10s and 20s at this point. You know, you usually have one very good, strong person and you know, maybe a B team player at best, you know, because that's how these things are built. Building services companies, particularly professional services companies, is bloody hard. Yeah, bloody hard. And so again, the demand for us to do that was there, but you know, the customers understood the reason why we just focused on our knitting and focused on cloud migrations to start with. And it was really only then, once we got a bit of scale in that organization, you know, north of 10 mil a year, that we started looking at other opportunities. And Brendan, that was largely focused around listening to our customer, you know, the learnings and IP that we'd developed from doing 100 plus migrations, you know, of big businesses and government agencies, and actually looking at the roadblocks that were, I guess, stopping us from going faster. And so a couple of those things were cloud connectivity. I mean, you guys know this better than anybody. You know, if your servers and storage are now in Australia and your users are in Invercargill, Hamilton and Tauranga, then why on earth would you be here putting your traffic back to a data center in Wellington or Auckland only to let it burst out over there? And so, you know, concepts like secure access edge, software-defined WAN came out, and we were doing internet breakout at the site and connecting users directly to apps. And again, just like the cloud conversation, you know, with the, you know, our belief that the network and the internet more specifically is the new corporate WAN, that can be quite challenging to consume as well. So we wanted to take baby steps and only bite off one at a time, but it was all about driving velocity for our customer. If we could help own that turnkey experience for them, in cloud migration and automation and cloud connectivity and security and now privacy, then we felt we could give them the best possible experience and be in control alongside them of their own destiny without having to wait on a Big Four audit or a traditional legacy telco provider to connect something up in 8 weeks or whenever they feel like it.
I want to make sure I don't let you default to your marketing talking points too much. So I'm going to hit you with a different question, which is when you were, I guess, let's say sub 10 mil, and you
were, I guess, balancing customer demand with the supply side. How did you balance that being capacity led in terms of employing before you necessarily had the workload for those people based on perhaps sales projections, with actual going, we actually need the cash flow in the door, we need the signed contracts and the demand, and then we'll go higher to match that? Like, how did you balance supply versus capacity led decisions?
Yeah, really data driven. Yeah, we're a cloud company. We started with SaaS, everything. I'm a big believer. IBM and Cisco taught me a lot about sales methodology and sales forecasting. And so, Salesforce is a real critical tool for us in the early days of the Instillery. And so literally we looked at our funnel, but also we were punters, as an organization to challenge and disrupt. We knew we had to invest ahead of the curve. So like I said, as much as we relied on data and insights from that data, you got to rely on gut feel. And we had a number of customers on the back of some of our foundation ones saying, actually, we want to do what they have. We want that experience. We want that Instillery effect. And so I literally, as opportunities came up to hire new people, because we started to get a bit of a reputation in market as well. You get not just the push out of this is who we are, who we stand for, but actually the inbound demand from people going, actually, I like your style. I want to be part of that journey. And so, as those opportunities came up and presented themselves, I had governance really early as well established in the form of a board with a number of key people that I still have massive respect and trust in to this day. And I even though it was my money and Andy's money at the time, we decided, look, let's go and let's hire these people early, and then we just got to back ourselves.
I got huge respect for that.
And we're fortunate.
Sorry, I cut in there.
No, all good. That's I guess that's the thing. We were very fortunate that it came off.
Yeah, I've just got huge respect for people like yourself who have invested everything and yet can go, look, I'm going to get independent directors on who I trust. I acknowledge that I don't know everything, and I'm looking for that guidance. And I remember actually getting involved with Lightwire. Andrew Johnson did the same thing. He's like yourself, he was the owner, but he had that independent insight. In previous companies I've worked in, that was not the case. Very closed-minded owners who felt that it was their money, their decision, and they weren't interested. So, but I guess you're an interesting mix of following your gut, but being data-driven. Can you give us some examples where perhaps or an example maybe, where in the early days, maybe you shouldn't have followed your gut, or you shouldn't have been held back by the data? Is there any sort of insights or lessons you would give to someone in that position now around, the best approach?
I would say a couple of things. Sometimes the data lies. That's what I've learned. Sometimes the data lies. When you get into a business and there's all sorts of personalities, particularly a bigger one, the Instillery now, 50 million and 200 staff. Everyone can put a spin on the data as they present it up the line. So as the CE, as a leadership group, we only get the data that people really want us to see, or with a narrative that, you can shape the data to suit any narrative. And so all I would say is, a big lesson for me is actually staying close enough to the inner workings of the business to be able to call bullshit on when you think the data's wrong. And that's really the gut feel. But in the same vein, I've always believed empowerment. We hire absolute weapons. So my job largely is to get the fuck out of the way and let them do what they do best. And you got to trust. So that trust and empowerment is critical. So as long as you can do that, I think you're onto a good thing.
You mentioned a couple of things there. One, employee numbers, and two, revenue. What metrics matter for you now? Like, there's vanity metrics, there's metrics that, shareholders care about, and stakeholders, I guess. Which metric do you tie success to?
We live or die by two metrics. It's ENPS, which is our employment satisfaction, and customer NPS. We live or die by those two things. We've got a number of goals and, green light, red light, orange, all that sort of stuff. But the reality is, I'm a fundamental believer, as if we've created a psychologically safe, fun, empowered environment for our team, working on cool shit that matters, and we've got happy customers that are getting an amazing experience and it's unique and they see value in the partnership, then we've created something really special. And as a leadership group, management group, and everyone understands the role that they play, regardless if you're right at the front of house in our customer experience support team or all the way to our most senior consultants, managers, and leadership. And I think that combination is really, really important to understanding why those metrics matter and how they can move them positively and negatively.
No, I think I think I agree completely because our particular business runs with the scaling up methodology, which is all about having the right people on the bus. So if your EMPS is nice and high, then chances are those people are happy and you're doing something right. But two, I think customer experience from the MPS side is what drives your ability to, price at a point that drives profitability. If you're leading with price as opposed to experience, it's a very different equation. I guess on that, do you guys work to a particular business framework? Like, is there a particular model that you've either got, external help to abide by, or is it something you personally have read that you've really stuck with?
When we set out to do this thing, we wanted to create something brand new. We felt that, I love reading and particularly around business and business strategy and models and different leaders that have done things good, bad, and different. But again, I really wanted to create something new. So this is very organic, is what I would say about the Instillery business model. But we have created an operating model that again, I'm super proud of. And like I said, even if one day we were to write it down, I think it would be quite difficult to repeat because a lot of it was based on the early days around individuals and the personal experiences of some of our key leaders in the organization, which now very thankful and grateful. It's not relying on any one individual, me or anybody. It's embodied a culture and DNA of its own that sort of help us constantly move forward. And it's largely to do with some of our core values, Brendan. It's around a real desire across the business to challenge and be curious. And so we're constantly not only challenging our customers and our partners, but ourselves to be better and to do the right thing and to constantly look at ways to optimize. And so I think those as core values really inspire the next evolution of our operating model. But, everyone's so bought into it. It doesn't seem like a lot of big change. It's a lot of small changes that get us to where we need to go.
But I imagine during your lifetime, your growth to date, there's words there that would be better than the ones I've used. But during your journey, let's run with that. You've had a number of acquisitions and one particularly big merger. I'm really interested to sort of understand the lessons you've learned from that. But just touching on your last point, those sort of incremental changes, I imagine at some points during that journey through those mergers, those acquisitions, you've had quite punctuated points where, there's been a rapid change perhaps, or a more rapid change.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of it is tied to the growth. It gets to a point where, I'll give you an example. Finance is a critical function, right? For the first 3 years, I was the Instillery CEO, founder, accountant, sales manager, marketing manager. You name it. You wear so many hats in a tech startup. And I loved it. I love the variation of every day. But we hired a finance manager. And it's tied to some of the advice or lessons learned at the start. We hired a phenomenal finance manager. She was amazing. And even just the basics of like going through the monthly billing at the end of the month, I used to love that because it helped me stay close to the business. But, there's some stuff you just got to let go and let the people you've hired, the amazing talent come in and let them put their mark on it. And like I said, with the evolution of our operating model, a lot of it came down to the lessons and experience of the epic talent that we're bringing in. And so that was really important, to let go of the finance function. And even then, under the finance manager, now our finance team under our GM of Finance, Rach Money Bond, is massive. We've got 4 or 5 people, relatively speaking, not compared to the big boys, but for us, having a dedicated, 5-person finance team is huge. And they make our business so seamless and frictionless when it comes down to the lethargic processes we initially had. It's now fully automated with integrated apps because we've got a team of specialists executing that function and providing visibility and advice back to the business so we can continue every other facet of the organization. So I think that specialization and investment has been really critical to our success as well. But like I said, core to the values of being curious and challenging the way traditional organizations do it, to find shortcuts and paths of doing it better to give us those little incremental advantages over the competition, which the customers see and feel quite readily.
So your merger was with Origin, right?
Yes.
Yes, right. So how hard was it for you as the co-founder, kind of the name behind the brand, the more visible guy, to kind of, I don't know, park the ego? Is that the right term? I don't even know. But like to kind of go, this is no longer just mine. This is we're for the greater good of the business as a whole. We're going to go through this, and Michael Russell comes in. He's kind of got his team, and he's an energetic, entrepreneur in his own right. Like how hard was it to go through that process of going, right, I'm now part of something much bigger rather than, it being part of me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. And that was a crazy time. I would like to say it was really character building. It was a real character building time because we went from a 40, 50 person organization to 130 overnight, through the merger. We moved from, we'd been in Parnell, just even physically in Auckland for that period of time. We were still digesting the acquisition and merger with E02 as well, which had a number of regional offices, Waikato, Bay of Plenty, Taranaki, Welly as well, and so we'd just really come off the back end of that. And then, we had the opportunity with Michael to bring our two businesses together. And the thing for me, it's always been about scale. For us to have the impact we desire and we want, which we talk about amplifying the Instillery effect, we need to have scale, and we needed to evolve from being a professional services organization, like I said, really hard, consulting and engineering, to manage and operate. Because number one, our customers were demanding it, but also number two, we needed to get some assurity around recurring revenue to allow us to double down and invest further, to go get independent funds to grow. And so the origin thing for us was really special. And I've got a lot of respect for Mike and he's a good friend of mine, a lot of trust there. He has built a business over 20 years that's been a cornerstone of IT in New Zealand. One of the things that I learned really quickly when we started kicking it around was he took me in to meet some of their core customers, and the customers love them. The customers absolutely love them. They love the experience. It was about partnership, not supply. It was genuine partnership and genuine challenge and genuine desire to push and do more, go above and beyond. And then when Mike introduced me to some of his key people, individual contributors and managers alike, I remember sitting down with these people and they just blew my mind because they reminded me of my team. I didn't think anybody else had that. So that was quite a humbling moment when you're like, oh, actually, there's some phenomenal talent around the market. And so, particularly with those two things, I guess once I got it through my own head, I was just really excited to pull the trigger and do the thing. And so for the origin customers, it gave them a roadmap to over the horizon, taking advantage of cloud and DevOps and all the cool stuff that the Instillery could bring. But for us, we'd had a couple of misfires, being real honest here, around trying to build out and operate and manage service practice 24/7, enterprise class, with all the security and privacy requirements that you need to manage this critical data, with taonga as well, which is really important around multi-data sovereignty. And so when we brought these two things together, it was the best of both worlds. And so Mike and I really early on, I remember we were sitting up at a conference in Singapore together once we had already done the deal before we had all announced it, and with a number of our peers and colleagues. And we sat down and we actually just worked out how we we're going to work. Because, Mike had been a leader in his own right as MD of Origin for 21 years. And so, to be honest, he was amazing. He was like, look, you do the CEO thing, you do out and up, inspire, motivate, challenge, and grow. And he said, and I'll run this thing day to day. And man, is he a great operator. And I'm just so proud of the partnership and business that we've been able to build together, albeit not without its challenging times, across the last couple of years and a couple of COVID pandemics and lockdowns thrown in.
Yeah, that'll trip you up. Yeah,
it could, but I'm just really proud of the stickability of Mike and the team, and our ability to put our customers first and our team first and ride out what's probably been the most challenging operating conditions of my entire career, but also come out on top and still achieve our goals. I think I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, it should be. And I think that MPS focus you mentioned earlier on, it's kind of clear that talking about that merger story and you being prepared to kind of dilute your ownership. I mean, of course, you stand to gain longer term, big picture, bigger business worth more, lesser share probably works out better, of course. But it sounds to me like it's driven by customer requirements and your desire to deliver a great customer experience. And if you could do that by going, you know what, I don't know everything, we don't have everything sorted. Mike and his team have got this kind of in spades. It sounds like really good framing from where I sit.
100%.
Cool. On that front though, you've now made, I think, is it 2 Black Labs? Was that the other recent acquisition?
Yeah, that's right. Yep, that's right.
Cool. So just on that, on the merger, on the VO2, which I totally overlooked, What have you learned about integrating businesses?
This is something near and dear to my heart. What I would say is some analogy about a snake eating a goat and then another goat walks past. Don't try and eat another goat at the same time. Not calling Origin a goat, big fans of Origin guys. But but what I would say is it takes longer than you think. It takes longer than you think. And as much as you can say we're going to smash these things together, within a couple of months and happy days, my biggest learning is you've got to take the people on a journey. And we've done this badly and we've done this well, in our learnings over the years. You've got to bring the people on the journey and you've got to help them, like I said at the very beginning, understand the why. What's the purpose? What's in it for them? What's in it for our customers? And again, when you probably by the time you're tired of telling people why, they'll only just be getting it and understanding. And so in addition to the why, the comms are critical. Comms are critical, and that's probably been reinforced through COVID and lockdown and having our 200 plus members of the whānau all over New Zealand. We've gone to video. It's not about short cycle comms or email anymore. This is about connecting on a really human level, live, not pre-production, no makeup room there, and really going to them with really honest, frank conversations and being open and transparent. And I think as soon as we got that right, we saw everyone lift. Physically, mentally, and performance lift as well. And it was really that connection of purpose and a strong comms plan and execution that really catapulted the success of all the mergers and acquisitions that we've delivered.
Yeah, there's a guy much smarter than me called Paulo Dwyer. He does some consulting with us through his business, and he's awesome. But one of the simple messages he gave me a while ago was when it comes to leadership, repeat, which ties back to your message. Just when you think you're sick of saying it, people are just starting to hear it, and it's amazingly simple but true. You can't say the key things often enough or in enough different ways. When it matters, you got to keep saying it. So yeah, that rings very true. What about the cost of integration? When you look now at opportunities, how much do you factor in the intangible cost of people's time? The people who are already flat out are going to have to drop what they're doing and work on integrating systems to recognize or to realize the required synergies or savings to make the deal worthwhile. How do you factor that into the opportunities you now look at?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, really good question. And like I said, historically, with the very early M&A that we did, I worked with the board quite closely, and they've got a wealth of experience, between Jason, the old man, and Bill English as well, and doing this type of thing. And so for us, I engage our leaders of our respective divisions, get in and have a look with me very early. Obviously, that means a few more people in the know and NDAs up to wazoo. But by bringing in the respective leaders, the experts, like I said, get out of the way, get the experts in the room quickly. And we quickly come up with a plan. And now we've got a bit of a template for what's good and what's not. And we pretty much give each section a bit of a score. And then we apply basically a burden cost, which is obviously factored into the EV, the enterprise valuation, and or multiply depending on how we're coming up with a calculation. That gives us a view of, here's what we think the value's worth, less the cost of doing the deal, plus the cost of doing the deal, here's the total investment, and does the business case still stack?
Okay. Nice. Yeah, it makes sense to me. I like the burden cost as a concept as well. Haven't heard that one before. All right, Mike, I reckon that's a pretty great place to leave it. That's been a good, solid chat. And I feel like there's actually some new stories in there for me, which is a surprise after many, many long nights with you. But I appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time out.
All good, Brendan. Thank you.
And that's us for this episode. Thank you very much to everyone who has listened through to this point. Really appreciate it. If you've got any feedback, ideas, suggestions, that sort of thing, please just reach out. Brendan at insightsasaservice.fm is my email, or you can just find me on LinkedIn. Next episode, we've got a conversation for you with Zach Levy from Deloitte, who has a really interesting MSP success story of his own.
So it was pretty much around, let me get close to AWS, and I just parked myself at AWS offices at least 2-3 days a week. I was just there. I was setting up meetings with people that I knew there, and I made sure that there's at least an hour, 2-hour gap. So I was loitering at the kitchen with my laptop and doing work, and I cannot tell you how many leads or deals we had from, Zach, you're here. Awesome, I was just thinking about you.
But that's to come next episode, and we will see you then.